Do you have any concerns for the fighters moving forward during this pandemic?
Oh, it's going to be interesting. You know, I coached a season of The Ultimate Fighter, and so this isn't the first time I've seen fighting without fans. And by the way, right on the very beginning of this whole pandemic, as you put it, we had one fight in Brazil, and there was no fans there. It was very interesting. I never knew how much the audience really played into the energy and some of the enjoyment. But as far as the competition, all the unified rules are taking place. All of the government regulations taking place. Dana White even moved the goalpost of government regulation 3 steps by isolating each fighter in hotel rooms, putting treadmills in their hotel rooms so they can cut weight. He's even got some towel system, so there's not even a cleaning service that will come in contact with anybody.
Chael, I'd like to know what kind of effect do you believe it would have on a particular fighter to be performing without fans in attendance for an actual event? It's one thing to be practicing, and my attitude is they're practicing under these conditions in most instances anyway. But obviously, if you're talking about an event and you're anticipating the crowd, the adrenaline, et cetera, what you alluded to earlier, what kind of effect do you think the absence of a crowd could potentially have on their performance?
Well, Stephen, I can tell you this. These fighters don't just start off in the UFC. They don't start off on ESPN. They started off at the dog park. They started off at local YMCAs in front of basically nobody. A couple moms and dads of their teammates would show up. So this isn't totally unforeseen for them. But I will tell you as the viewer, I'm very curious how this is going to look. I mean, we're going to hear things. The sound of a body shot, just by example, those are things that we don't pick up as a viewer. I think for some of the fighters, in all fairness, those crowds and some of the electricity you talk about brings a certain pressure. To go back to the point that you made, that this is more of a sparring session. This is a live sparring session. It's for real. But I do think that this is maybe what they're more used to.
Meantime, Ferguson, Gaethje, Dana's not wrong. That should be a barn burner. Both aggressive fighters, and Ferguson a kind of, in boxing at least, which is what I'm most familiar with, sometimes that unorthodox fighter who does things not exactly as you're expecting is more difficult because, your defense is not prepared for the thing that comes in an unorthodox way. I'm thinking of Ferguson, but Gaethje aggressive. Who wins?
Yeah, very interesting, right? I mean, everything is leaning towards Ferguson. Don't forget, Ferguson has been training for a 5-round world title fight for a meaningful period of time. Gaethje got the call last minute. Now, Max, you want to know what's a little bit interesting about this? The fact that this fight was delayed from April 18th until May 9th, that does give Gaethje a couple of more weeks to train. And before anybody thinks, well, how good a shape can you get in a couple of weeks? The answer is really good shape. When you know and that goalpost get moved and that weigh-in is now a little bit further out and you get to keep a little more calories in and you get to focus a little bit. I mean, Gaethje himself said, if I don't get him out of there in 10 to 12 minutes, you better hope that you bet on Ferguson, but I'm going to go out there and try. Now, all of a sudden, that 10 to 12 minutes just moved to 16 to 18 minutes of ferocity.
Meantime, the money fighters in and around that division who everyone wants a shot at is Conor McGregor if he's fighting, or Khabib if not, because Conor's considered the easier fight for more money, but they're both big money, big name fighters. Does the winner get one of those guys? Does the loser get one of those guys, do you think?
Come on, the winner of this had better get Khabib, right? I mean, this is an interim world title fight. This fight has been promised to Tony Ferguson. Look, you can't blame Dana for pushing back and going, guys, I tried to do this 5 times. I spent roughly $4 million in marketing on each of those fights. I'm down $20 million, and it looks like this fight is just not meant to happen. You can't blame someone for saying that, but you can't blame us fans, Max, for saying, look, you got to put the interim champion against the undisputed champion. To answer your question, I think yes. I think the winner of this fight draws into Khabib.
Chael, what do you think it means that Khabib's not fighting? That he's not going to be on this card?
Well, look, Khabib is such a great fighter, but in fairness, Khabib is not a dynamic fighter. And the time of the grindy guy and the great guy to come back is going to happen in the UFC. But for this weekend, this is about dynamic fighters. And it's not just main event heavy, by the way. Some people have gone as far as to call this the most loaded card of all time. Don't forget, there's 3 other fights on this card that have already been scheduled to be main events of other cards. Those cards fell through because of the times that we're in. They're all put on this card. The 3rd fight of the night, which is Uriah Hall versus Jacare Souza, was scheduled to be a main event in Brazil. This thing is loaded, and it's loaded. Dynamic is the word that I would use.
I'm going to go back, Chael, to Conor McGregor in this respect. I think I heard Dana White say that Conor McGregor is not interested in anyone but Khabib, considering the money he has earned, the fame and acclaim that he has brought to himself and to the UFC basically as well. I think he plays a role in that. How do you feel about his approach? I'm not interested in fighting anybody but Khabib, and do you think that's wise for him to have that approach?
Well, I've never known Conor. Look, I know what Conor's interested in. I know what his goals are. He's been very open about that. But Conor McGregor has never backed down. There's never been a story that Dana White has ever told where he called Conor McGregor and had an idea, and Conor said no to it. And by the way, Conor's been fighting at 170 pounds. I mean, let's start a little bit of a rumor here. What's happened in the last 72 hours is the world title fight at 170 between Masvidal and champion Kamaru Usman, for reasons unknown, is now no longer happening. No guy got injured. No guy pulled out. The fight has just been canceled. I do think when you look at that in conjunction with the dates, don't forget Khabib is in Ramadan right now and will not return until earliest of September 16th, according to Khabib. I think if you look at the calendar and the fact that the BMF George Masvidal calendar just freed up. Oh, and by the way, Conor's sitting out there for something to do. I don't know that I've ever bought the idea that Conor McGregor is sitting out until September for Khabib or anybody else.